coming. Mahomes, man wide open. Touchdown Chiefs and Sky Moore.
The Kansas City Chiefs are contenders for another season, and probably will be until Patrick Mahomes retires. That means for the foreseeable future, they're likely going to have a chokehold on the AFC West, and that'll be no different this season. I think the Chiefs' offense is going to be fantastic no matter who they have around Mahomes, but that isn't to say they brought in some new, solid signings, and they did. They have two new starting tackles in Donovan Smith and Jawan Taylor, and while neither of these guys are great run blockers, they're both pretty good pass blockers, and I can't imagine they'll be doing much of the former in Kansas City, so they should do well with the Chiefs. They also have some pretty good depth at receiver. Richie James was signed after a decent year with the Giants, Kadarius Toney is getting much hype as a potential wide receiver 1, and Sky Moore, Rashee Rice, and Justin Ross are all intriguing young talents. Marquez Valdes-Scantling is a serviceable starter as well. And yeah, Travis Kelce is still around too, and it doesn't hurt to have the best tight end in football. Additions were made on defense too, like Charles Omenihu on the defensive line, Drew Tranquill at linebacker, and Mike Edwards at safety, all of whom are good players at their respective positions. Nick Bolton and George Karlaftis should see some improvement as well, and L'Jarius Sneed and Trent McDuffie are quickly forming a nice, young duo at cornerback. But things could be rough without Chris Jones. At the time of recording, he still hasn't ended his holdout as he seeks an improved contract, and it doesn't look like he's coming back anytime soon. I'm not exactly sure why the Chiefs just don't want to pay him. He's a blank check player that deserves whatever he's asking for, especially after a career season in 2022. Jones makes that defense go, and without him, it will almost certainly go from a solid defense to a below average one. Given how great the offense is, I'm not sure it's going to make the Chiefs fall below the upper echelon, but it will definitely affect their Super Bowl chances the longer Jones' holdout continues. But that's the only concern I have with them. Other than that, Kansas City will surely be one of the AFC's best once again. The Denver Broncos should be one of the NFL's most improved teams in 2023. Whether that gets them into the playoffs or not is another debate, but they definitely won't be bottom feeders after the offseason they had. After a year off, Sean Payton is back in the league as Denver's head coach, and most of their improvement is going to come from that alone. He's a massive upgrade over Nathaniel Hackett, a better play caller than him, and one that should bring a much improved scheme that I spent an entire video covering. This is great news for Russell Wilson, who had a disappointing year, but should bounce back under Payton if he designs a good offense to fit around what he does best. The Broncos have gotten very unlucky with injuries, specifically at receiver with guys like Jerry Jeudy and Tim Patrick going down, but Courtland Sutton, one of the league's most underrated route runners, is still around alongside Marvin Mims, who I was extremely high on coming into the draft. With the injuries, he'll get a chance to shine immediately, and I think he's going to run with it and become a really good vertical threat for Wilson. Javonte Williams and new signing Samaje Perine fit Payton's run scheme well, and they'll be running behind an improved offensive line featuring new signings like Ben Powers and Mike McGlinchey. So, Payton has the tools to do what he wants to do well. On the other side, the Broncos defense was one of the league's best last year, and I don't think that changes this season. Justin Simmons and Patrick Surtain are two of the best at their positions, and Zach Gallen is a really good replacement for Draymond Jones. In fact, I consider it an upgrade. Frank Clark is a decent addition on the defensive line, and if Randy Gregory can stay healthy, he should have an improved 2023 that will live up to the big contract Denver gave him. The loss of Ejiro Rivera will sting, but Vance Joseph wasn't a bad replacement, so the Broncos can pick up where they left off last season. They won't win their division. Kansas City has that locked down, and the AFC is stacked with wildcard contenders, so making the playoffs will be a challenge. But Denver has definitely given themselves a fighting chance. The same can be said for the Chargers as well, who are coming off a very disappointing exit in the wildcard round last season. Like the Vikings in the NFC, I do think the Chargers hit a plateau in the offseason because there wasn't much done to make them vastly more improved than they were last season. But that isn't to say they didn't make some good additions, because they did. Quentin Johnston is going to inject some much needed life into the receiver room, and as someone who can break the game open and take advantage of Justin Herbert's arm talent and deep ball ability, something which LA sorely lacked in 2022. Keenan Allen has been declining, but he's still a good receiver, as is Mike Williams, so the Chargers should be solid at the position this year. Austin Eckler remains one of the league's most versatile backs, and Rashawn Slater is back after missing most of last season with an injury. The big question, though, is on new offensive coordinator Kellen Moore, who will have full control of an offense after clashing with Mike McCarthy in Dallas last year. I think he's a good play designer and good play caller, but lacks the ability to adjust in-game when defenses figure him out. He just has a tendency to put his offense in a box and call the same things over and over, regardless of if it's working out or not. Either that, or he just tries to get cute for the sake of it. Hopefully that won't happen in 2023, because I do think he's a good OC that can get a lot better with improvements. On defense, the Chargers will be hoping to get full seasons out of Joey Bosa and JC Jackson. While we don't have to worry about Bosa's talent, Jackson wasn't good in the small amount of games he played last year before getting hurt. If he can bounce back, the Chargers will have a really good cornerback room because Michael Davis and Asante Samuel really stepped up in his absence. Both turned the Chargers secondary into one of the most physical in the league, alongside the always elite Derwin James, who should have another stellar season in 2023. Tranquill went east to Kansas City, but Eric Kendricks came in as his replacement, and while he did take a step back with Minnesota in 2023, he's still an upgrade over Tranquill and should be a good influence on the young Kenneth Murray as well. Additionally, Khalil Mack is still a solid edge rusher. But I have my worries with this unit. It was a middle-of-the-pack defense last year that was horrific at stopping the run, and they still lack any kind of talent in the interior of their defensive line to improve that aspect this season. Kendricks may make it a little bit better, but LA's run defense could prove to be their downfall again, and if it is, Chargers fans are going to have a long season watching this defense. It's looking like another 9-win, let's hope and pray we make the wild card kind of season for the Chargers. The Raiders are, well, the Raiders. After having an average pass defense in 2021 and not doing much to improve it, resulting in an even worse pass defense in 2022, Vegas proved to the NFL world that they learned nothing by doing the bare minimum to improve their secondary this offseason. It took them well into the offseason to sign a decent corner, and Marcus Epps is an just okay safety. Instead of addressing the secondary further, they took a luxury pick in Tyree Wilson in the first round instead. He'll be good, sure, but it's really not what they needed. But hey, at least the pass rush will be really good with him, Max Crosby, and Chandler Jones, right? They better hope it is. Because if quarterbacks get, 0.5 seconds to throw, they're gonna get torched through the air. This was one of the worst defenses in the league by DVOA last year, and unless Peters and Epps can vastly improve the secondary, I don't think they're going to make a big jump to even being a middle-of-the-pack defense. And on offense, oh boy. So you had Derek Carr, right? He did have some struggles last season, but still isn't terrible by any measure. So what do? You get rid of him and bank on grabbing someone that's better, but after botching that completely, failing to get a guy like Aaron Rodgers, and not having a high enough draft pick to get a surefire replacement, they end up getting everyone's favorite game manager in Jimmy Garoppolo. I mean, he isn't bad, not at all. He'll give you serviceable and safe quarterback play. But after dumping Carr in an attempt to not be average, this just seems like a huge letdown. But he is surrounded by a lot of talent, which helped him with the 49ers. Devontae Adams is still one of the league's best receivers, Josh Jacobs ended his holdout before the season started, and Jacoby Myers was a really good signing from the Patriots. And Colton Miller is a standout on what otherwise is a pretty average looking offensive line. But I don't know, the Raiders just don't look like a playoff team to me right now. Maybe I'm wrong. The Cincinnati Bengals might just have the best roster in the AFC this season, and are likely contenders for a third straight season. It seems inevitable that Joe Burrow will eventually have an MVP contending season, and I think he could win it this year since he looks like he's going to be healthy for week 1. Jamar Chase has shot to the top of the odds for Offensive Player of the Year, T. Higgins might just be the best wide receiver 2 in football, and Tyler Boyd might just be the best wide receiver 3 in football. They brought in the new free agent signing as well in Orlando Brown, and he isn't a bad addition to the offensive line, even when you consider some of the struggles he had last season. And Joe Mixon is still a running back who can make a good contribution. I think it's safe to say the Bengals are going to have an elite offense again this season, one that might just take them all the way to the Super Bowl for the second time in 3 seasons. On defense, we see the only significant loss the Bengals suffered this offseason, as Jesse Bates jumped to the Falcons, and while Nick Scott won't contribute like he can still be a serviceable replacement. And despite the loss of Bates, Cincinnati should still have a really good defense. Trey Hendrickson, Sam Hubbard, and one of the best run-stopping defensive tackles in DJ Reader all man the same defensive line. Logan Wilson and Jermaine Pratt is a solid linebacker duo, and Chidobe Awuzie is a good CB1, and Cam Taylor-Britt should have a starting role this season, where I think he makes a good second-year improvement. The Bengals will be extremely dangerous and one of the best teams in football this season. Is this the year they finally win it all? Stay tuned till the end. Even with the Bengals being as good as they are, there are still many more solid teams just in their division, as the AFC South is a candidate to be the best division in football this season. Enter the Cleveland Browns, who could see themselves ascend back to the playoffs after a 7-10 year in 2022. After lacking receiver depth behind Amari Cooper, Cleveland traded for Elijah Moore and drafted Cedric Tillman to try and solve it. And while they could have done just a bit more, their wide receiver core looks more full headed into 2023. Which should take some pressure off Cooper, who's still a very good receiver, despite what some might tell you. Nick Chubb is the most efficient runner in all of football, and he's still running behind a very good offensive line including Joel Bitonio and Wyatt Teller, and Ethan Pocic definitely surprised me by breaking out into one of the best centers in the league last season. I'm still waiting on a breakout season from Jedrick Wills though, but if he does, the offensive line will still remain near the top of the league, and it may do that anyway, even if Wills doesn't break out. The Browns had a similar depth problem on the defensive line, with Garrett's 72 pressures dwarfing the next closest guy at 29 pressures last season. But Cleveland stacked that unit more than they did their wide receiver room. Dalvin Tomlinson and Zadarius Smith. Yeah, I think the Browns got more than just depth. They brought in a really good defensive tackle and paired Smith with Garrett to create arguably the best edge rusher duo in the entire league. Behind them, JOK, Anthony Walker, and Sione Takitaki fill out the linebacker unit well, and the Browns will never have to worry about depth in the secondary with Denzel Ward backed up by Greg Newsome, Martin Emerson, Grant Delpit, and new signing Juan Thornhill. I think with the talent that the Browns have, they're comfortably the second best team in this division. The gap between them and teams like the Ravens is close, but the Browns have the potential to be a real sleeper in the entire AFC if a certain someone goes back to his old self at quarterback. Good old Baltimore, a franchise that seems perpetually in playoff contention, but one that has never seemed to reach the top in quite some time due to some kind of yearly misfortune. For the second straight season, that was an injury to Lamar Jackson, and if he stayed healthy, the Ravens definitely make it farther in last year's playoffs in my mind. And somehow, he's become one of the most disrespected quarterbacks in football because of weird narratives about his passing and things relating to team stats like playoff wins. It doesn't change the fact that Jackson is still one of the most dynamic quarterbacks in the game currently, and is still an elite quarterback who deserves more praise than he's gotten lately. He more than earned that contract this past offseason, and Baltimore did their best to improve the talent around him. In come Odell Beckham and Zay Flowers, my favorite receiver out of last year's draft. He combines a great vertical ability and speed with fantastic route running and agility, and the fact Baltimore got him as low as they did is such a steal. J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards make a solid duo when both are healthy, and they're running behind a line including Tyler Linderbaum, who's already one of the league's best centers after just one season. But Baltimore's defense is a bit of a mixed bag in my opinion. The secondary is stacked with Marcus Williams, Marlon Humphrey, and Kyle Hamilton, the latter of whom should break out into being an elite safety if his snap count gets increased. Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen are a very good linebacker duo, and the presence of Smith definitely brought the best out of Queen last season. But I don't know, the defensive line just seems kinda average. Odafe is someone I'm a fan of, but there really isn't anyone notable around him, unless guys like Travis Jones can take a step up. Considering the talent the Ravens have behind the defensive line though, it can probably hide the lack of it in the pass rush game. Does Baltimore make the playoffs this year? It's tough to say. I'll come back to this a lot, but the AFC wildcard picture is stacked, and the Ravens might fall victim to it, but they'll be in the race until the end of the season for sure. The Steelers have been on a slow decline since the end of the 2020 regular season. That year they had an embarrassing exit from the playoffs, followed that up with another wildcard exit after barely squeaking into the playoffs in 2021, and fell short of the playoffs by the same margins last season. And given the amount of talent that's in Pittsburgh's division, it'll be a tough road to make it back to the playoffs, or even extend Mike Tomlin's winning season streak. I think the chances of both happening increase depending on how much Kenny Pickett improves, if he improves at all. And I think he can improve, but maybe not to the level that most Steelers fans hope. He could definitely reach the caliber of a Derek Carr or Daniel Jones, but I think it'll take a lot for him to reach the tier of some of the league's best quarterbacks. He doesn't have to be for Pittsburgh to be a playoff team, but that's where I see his projection right now. George Pickens is someone that can improve a lot though, and he definitely displayed his talents last season. The presence of Deontay Johnson alongside him will help out Pittsburgh's offense as well. And while he's declined recently, Allen Robinson can be a decent wide receiver 3 at this stage of his career. The offensive line was just okay last season, but the addition of Isaac Stumalo should make it a little bit better. Who knows how much Najee Harris will get better, but he's got room to grow despite some of the efficiency problems he's shown. He can definitely give you good production though, and I think he will this season, to an extent. On defense, having TJ Watt back for potentially a full season will be huge, and Cameron Hayward is still one of the league's best defensive tackles alongside him. On the opposite side, Alex Highsmith gives you great depth, and Larry Ogunjobi and Cole Holcomb were decent free agent additions to the front seven. But if there's a defensive player I'm excited about for the Steelers, it's Joey Porter Jr., who has a real good chance to hit the ground running immediately as Pittsburgh's CB1. The fact the Steelers, well, stole him in the second round should be considered a crime. He's a really good physical corner who should cause problems when pressing receivers in man coverage. It's also nice to see Minkah Fitzpatrick back to being the league's best safety after a dip in 2021. Overall, I think Pittsburgh is going to have a really good defense if everyone can stay healthy, and boy do they need it after having a below average defense last season. The Bills had a weird offseason. After another disappointing playoff exit, you'd think Buffalo would try to make noticeable improvements, especially since there's a couple AFC teams that may have passed them by. Teams like the Cowboys did that after their playoff letdown, and the Bills should have done the same. They did not do that. The Bills mostly relied on building through the draft, which isn't a terrible strategy, it's just not ambitious enough if you're still trying to be true contenders, and it makes matters worse when your draft class leaves a lot to be desired. It may force Buffalo back into a strategy of, hey Josh Allen, try to bail us out by making ridiculous throws, which is a strategy that caused Allen to put the ball in danger a lot last year, and that became a real problem of his. But it's also what the Bills needed to happen in order to win, even though it can come back to bite you, as evidenced by last year's playoff game against the Bengals. That kind of offense does you no favors, despite Allen's talent. I like the Dalton Kincaid pick the more I think about it though, and I'm interested to see how Buffalo uses him this year. James Cook should have an improved year now that he's the feature back, and Damian Harris isn't a bad guy to pair him with as an RB2. The Bills will hope for a second year lead from guys like Khalil Shakur as well, who I was a big fan of when he came out of Boise State. And look, I like Gabe Davis, but I can't overlook the fact that he's a very inconsistent receiver, so they better hope for some improvement from guys like Shakur. On defense, Von Miller was great before getting hurt, so here's hoping he gets a full season in 2023. Greg Rousseau, Ed Oliver, and Daquan Jones are good options to have on the defensive line as well, so that unit should be the best part of the Bills' defense. Matt Milano is one of the best coverage linebackers in football as well, and was first team All-Pro for a reason in 2022. Just like Miller, the Bills will hope Micah Hyde can stay healthy as well, and when he is, he creates one of, if not the best safety duo in the league alongside Jordan Poyer. And Tre'Davious White was also hurt last year. Did the Bills struggle with injuries on defense last year? Hard to tell. Anyway, if he isn't able to get back to form immediately, Taron Johnson is a decent second option, and both Kyer Elam and Christian Benford both have room to grow. And say what you want about his talent, it's nice to see DeMar Hamlin back. A really good story there. But I can't help but think Buffalo hit a plateau this offseason, given the lack of substantial improvements, and that could not only cost them their contender status, it could cost them their AFC East crown. I could be wrong. And a team that looks primed to snatch that division crown is the Miami Dolphins. This was a really exciting team to watch last season because of their explosive offense, which was hampered by two things happening to Tua Tagovailoa. Firstly, he had multiple concussions, in part due to negligence from Miami's medical staff, and secondly, he had some late season regression that cost his team a couple games. I don't want to say Tua's been figured out yet, I want to see a larger sample size across a hopefully healthy season from him before I say that, but it is cause for at least some slight concerns. But I think Tua will be more than fine. Guys like Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle certainly help with that, as arguably the best receiver duo in football, and Mike McDaniel is their head coach, so I'm more than confident that Miami's offense will see lots of success. The same might have been said for their defense, but losing Jalen Ramsey for most of the season is going to sting, especially since he was a big reason why I saw major improvement from that side of the ball. But I think Miami's defense can still be really good. Vic Fangio is their defensive coordinator, and boy is he going to make an impact. All the things you see in modern day defenses like heavy defensive line fronts and loads of quarters coverages came from this man. He's the godfather of all the ways defenses have evolved over the past few seasons, and him being in Miami is going to prove its defense just by his presence. And it's not like Ramsey was the only player they brought in. David Long had a really good year in Tennessee last season and is one of the league's most underrated linebackers. Jalen Phillips, Christian Watkins, and Javon Holland are all guys to be excited about as well, especially the former two. And Bradley Chubb should have a good year now that he's fully settled into Miami. I don't know how popular or unpopular this take is, but I think they have a serious chance of winning the division. I'd go as far as to make them favorites, but more on that later. The Jets should be improved as well. I think this is a team that's gotten way too much hype over the offseason, but some of that hype isn't completely unwarranted. The addition of Aaron Rodgers should be a big upgrade at quarterback, even if he doesn't return to the elite signal caller that we're all used to seeing. Garrett Wilson's sophomore leap seems inevitable at this point, and there's no telling how far he can climb. The sky's the limit for a guy with as much potential as he has, and he should be very exciting to watch this season. Another man with loads of potential is Breece Hall, who's now fully healthy, and Dalvin Cook was a great addition to the offense as well. Who knows how good the offensive line is going to be, but the Jets could have a great rushing attack if all goes well. But I really want to talk about the defense, because the things that Robert Saleh is going to be able to do with the unit brings out the football nerd in me. I mean, do the Jets have a bad defensive lineman? Quinnen Williams, Carl Lawson, John Franklin Myers, Jermaine Johnson, Solomon Thomas, Al Woods, and on it goes. Even Will McDonald, a rookie who may not see much playing time because of the stacked defensive line around him, seems poised to make an impact. Saleh is going to have fun scheming things up for them. The wide nines, the overload fronts, the muggerlokes with CJ Mosley coming into play. The possibilities are endless, not just with the defensive line, but with the entire front seven as well. And if that wasn't enough of a reason, the Jets' secondary is equally dangerous. Sauce Gardner quickly became the best cornerback in football last year, and DJ Reed may be the leader of the, hey, let's talk about this player more club, alongside him. Add a solid safety duo in Jordan Whitehead and Adrian Amos, and you got a really good secondary on your hands. And because the Jets can get home with just 4 pass rushers, they can drop 7 back into coverage and beat you. There's so many ways this Jets defense can beat you, and they're going to be extremely hard to get past this season. This is a playoff team right here. Poor Patriots. You should have a really good defense, but it may be moot because the offense looks very uninspiring this season. Let's start off with the good by talking about that defense. Matthew Judon and Dietrich Wise form a really good duo on the defensive line, and Josh Uche gets involved as well at a really good rate, totaling 56 pressures last season. Jawan Bentley is a pretty underrated linebacker, and Jonathan Jones and Kyle Duggar hold down the secondary well. This is a defense that finished 3rd in EPA per play allowed last season, and the addition of guys like Christian Gonzalez will only enforce that. The fact that New England got him where they did is just unfair. He was the best cornerback in this year's draft and is in a great situation, surrounded by really good talent. He'll be good immediately, and should contend for Defensive Rookie of the Year. But we all know the Patriots' defense will be good. The question will be if the offense can hold up their end of the bargain, and I'm not entirely sure if they can. Mac Jones puts a limited ceiling on the unit, and while there's still room for him to grow, I just don't see him getting much better than he is right now. Juju Smith-Schuster was a good signing from the Chiefs, but considering he's at the same level as the departing Jacoby Myers, I'm not so sure how his presence improves the wide receiver core by a whole lot. Maybe Tyquan Thornton can make an improvement this year though. New England's rushing attack will be good though. Ramondre Stevenson really made his mark last season, and being behind a solid interior offensive line with David Andrews and Mike Onwenu benefits him greatly as well, even if Trent Brown and Riley Reiff aren't that great on the outside. But teams that can only hurt you on the ground and not so much in the air don't really project well. The defense will prevent the Patriots from being terrible. They can get at least 7 or 8 wins, but they're on the outside of playoff contention right now. Now we get to the AFC South, which is certainly a division in the NFL this season. We could start with the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are the obvious favorites in this division and the team that I think will win this division. The big addition to this offense is Calvin Ridley, who was traded to the Jaguars last year and is coming off his year-long gambling suspension. A year away from football is a long time, but Ridley has looked impressive in both training camp and preseason, so I think he's going to make an impact and become the wide receiver 1 in this offense. He's surrounded by a good group of skill players as well, like Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, and Evan Ingram, the latter of whom had sort of a breakout season after a career of not living up to his potential. Anton Harrison is a notable addition to the offensive line, and he'll replace Jawan Taylor right tackle after being drafted in the 1st round. I think he's a good pick, and he'll make a good impression. This will also be a big year for Trevor Lawrence. After establishing himself as a franchise quarterback last season, he looks poised to make yet another big improvement, and I think he will this season and potentially compete for MVP. He's just a really good pure passer, and it'll be more on display with guys like Ridley in town. The defense will largely be the same last season after finishing 12th in EPA per play allowed, except for the loss of Arden Key, who left for a division rival in the Titans. This should be a solid defense again in 2023 and bring back the same core talent like Josh Allen, Foye Oluokun, Rayshawn Jenkins, and Darius Williams. And I can't forget about Tyson Campbell, who might be the most underrated cornerback in the league right now. He quietly had a really good season in 2022 with 3 interceptions, 9 pass breakups, and an 81.2 coverage grade. He's a bona fide CB1 in this league, and he's still got lots of potential. Guys like Devin Lloyd and Trayvon Walker do as well, and if they can make improvements, the Jaguars' defense has top 10 potential. Has Jacksonville done anything to close the gap between them and the top of the AFC? I'm not sure, but they should win their division and get another chance at a playoff run. I'm not sure they could pass the divisional round again though. The Tennessee Titans had a weird 2022 season. They fumbled a division lead towards the end of the season to finish at a disappointing 7-10, and as a result, both the GM and offensive coordinator left. Tim Kelly is the new OC, who's an in-house promotion, and I'm not so sure that was the best decision after finishing 26th in EPA per play on offense. A fresh face would have been better in my mind. But the talent got better in the offseason. The Titans improved what would have been the worst wide receiver core in the league by adding DeAndre Hopkins to it. Who knows if you're getting a full season out of him anymore, and he still might regress considering he's on the wrong side of 30, but he's still got some of the best hands in the league and the potential to make a big contribution. The offense will still lean on Derrick Henry though, who remains one of the best running backs in the league, but I do have my concerns about the offense. Even with the addition of rookie Peter Skoronski, I think the Titans' offensive line will be below average. It may not get off to a flying start either, with Nicholas Petit-Frere suspended to start the season. Ryan Tannehill is also just a meh quarterback, and I'm not sure how much he can contribute at this stage of his career. He's not a bad quarterback to have, I'm just not high on him, and I don't think he's someone that can take you very far. On the other side, the Titans retained some of their premium talent like Jeffrey Simmons and Kevin Byard, and added the aforementioned Key and Azeez Al-Shaair, who had a good season with the 49ers in 2022. But this is where the struggles came in. Tennessee had the league's worst pass defense in 2023, resulting in them having a very below-average defense last year despite having the league's best run defense. Even with the addition of Sean Murphy-Bunting, I don't think it projects above being a middle-of-the-pack defense in 2023. It'll certainly have its moments, but they're bound to be a liability as well. It's looking like another average season for the Titans. Mike Vrabel's coaching will prevent Tennessee from being a 5 or 6 win team, but it's hard to envision anything above, say, 8 wins. The Titans will be fine, but not great, and that might cost them a playoff spot. The Colts needed an offseason where they could have started fresh after a disastrous 2022 season, but boy did that not happen. Most of it has been occupied by the Jonathan Taylor saga, one of the many running backs in the league that attempted to get a new contract this offseason. Because Jim Irsay is, well, Jim Irsay, he spent the entire offseason making a mess of the situation, culminating in the most recent development where he's been granted permission to seek a trade. He'll eventually make his return though, which is good news for the Colts and for new rookie quarterback Anthony Richardson, who's the epitome of a boom or bust QB. He's a guy with supreme amounts of talent but lots of room for development, so Indy might just have to give him time. Michael Pittman and Alec Pierce are some of his receivers. Pittman is a good target, but a low-end wide receiver 1 who'd be better off as a wide receiver 2, and Pierce is a good talent with room to grow. I'm really excited about Josh Downs though, a slot guy who had an insane 75% contested catch rate against man coverage at North Carolina last season. He's got the chance to be a real explosive weapon with Indy. The offensive line is difficult to analyze. On paper, it should be good, but last year some guys were hurt and some guys declined, so who knows how it's going to play this season. Shane Steichen is their new, offensive-minded head coach, and I think he was a really good hire. If his scheme is similar to what he ran with the Eagles last year, the Colts offense can look promising this season. On defense, the Colts will hope to get Shaq Leonard back fully healthy, which is good because he's one of the league's best linebackers. He's backed up by 2 underrated linebackers in Zaire Franklin and EJ Speed. Franklin had a quiet but impressive 2022 season, while Speed did well in the limited snaps he got. After Bobby Okariki's departure, both should see increased roles, and I think both will impress in them. On the defensive line, Samson Ebukam is a good addition after tallying 43 pressures with the 49ers last season. Grover Stewart, DeForest Buckner, and Kwity Paye alongside him should make for a solid defensive line, and the defense as a whole has the potential to be solid. I think right now, the Colts just have to be patient. Lots of starters are going to need time to grow and develop, and Steichen will need time to implement his system. It may not happen this year, which may result in another disappointing season, but baby steps, Colts. You'll get there in due time. Now we get to the Texans, who actually seem to try to put together a competitive team this offseason, unlike in previous offseasons. DeMeco Ryans is their 4th head coach in 4 seasons, and he'll need to be around for at least a few seasons to give Houston some stability. He coached an exceptional defense last year with the 49ers, and brought him some talent to help the Texans' D make some improvements. Will Anderson is their shiny new first-round pick on the defensive line. Say what you want about how much the Texans gave to draft him, he's going to be a very good edge rusher, so I didn't have a problem with the trade at all. In addition, Jimmy Ward followed Ryans to Houston, where he should be able to play more safety instead of nickel, and Denzel Perryman was a solid signing at linebacker. What I'm excited about though is to see if Derek Stingley can improve. He wasn't able to live up to his potential last season because he just didn't fit Lovie Smith's scheme at all, but I'm confident that Ryans will find a way to use him. And Jalen Petrie is another young guy who should thrive under Ryans as well. The Texans also have a shiny new rookie on offense in quarterback CJ Stroud, who was my QB2 in this year's draft. He was a good pocket passer at Ohio State that showed great timing, anticipation, and good ball placement with his throws. I've always had one grievance with him though, and that's his lack of ability to play out of structure, which he may have to do a lot in Houston thanks to mostly average talent surrounding him. Don't get me wrong, Larry Tunsil is still a great tackle, and Shaq Mason was a good acquisition for the interior offensive line. Dameon Pierce should see an improvement as well, but others like Noah Brown and Dalton Schultz are going to harm Stroud more than they can help him. He just isn't exactly in the best situation right now, so I'm still expecting some glaring mistakes alongside the flashes of talent he'll show this season. Still, I think Stroud will be a solid QB in time and has the potential to be a top 10 guy. If the Texans want him to get there though, they'll have to form a good supporting cast around him, and Stroud just doesn't have that right now. It's only year 1 though, he's got time. Gonna get my Super Bowl picks alongside this as well. I think the Chiefs earn the 1 seed again, Bengals come in at 2, the Dolphins snatch the 3 seed, and the Jaguars come in at 4. In what should be a very competitive wildcard race, the Bills, Browns, and Jets are my 3 teams that get in. The Ravens, Broncos, and Chargers will get close, but they'll fall inches short. In the wildcard round, I think the Bengals, Bills, and Browns all advance. Cincinnati will beat Buffalo, and Kansas City will beat Cleveland in the divisional, and the Bengals beat the Chiefs in yet another AFC Championship rematch. I know, I'm bold. If you watched my last video, I had the 49ers in the Super Bowl, but I think the Bengals take them down and win Super Bowl 58 in Las Vegas. Cincinnati is my champion this year. That brings us to the end. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, comment your thoughts, and share this video with others. As always, thanks for watching.